Hey there, everybody. Welcome to episode 10 of the GDO show. It is episode 10 of the GDO show, I guess. I'm not going to go into much of an intro before the thing, so let's go ahead and play my little tune, and then we'll start with today's show, because I got a lot to go over today. It's a big One Piece discussion today, so let's begin. It's the GDO show. You know, one of these days I'm probably gonna start doing that live. I just need to remember how to do it. I think I have my recorder by my desk here somewhere. I know I used to have it around here somewhere. I don't remember exactly what I did with it. I might have moved it over to my yeah, here it is. So it's so I don't know. One of these days I'll do the intro live, and then maybe I'll get good at it, and then we'll just kind of get onto it. So today I don't have a lot to talk about before we start talking about One Piece. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite arcs in the early series of One Piece, Little Garden. It's got a lot of really fun things in it, and I forgot to grab water before the show start. So hopefully I won't run out of steam halfway through the show, because I don't know, I'm used to drinking a lot of water. I drink out of a 1.5 liter water bottle. I don't know what that is in ounces for y'all who live in America, but 1.5 liters is quite a bit, and I just always have it on me. So today I have a glass of water which maybe has 2 tablespoons of water left in it, so that's going to get me through the next 2 hours, I hope. And if not, then I'll have to take a brief 30-second pause. I'll in a little bit to get some water. So, on the agenda today, and I know SHM is waiting for this, but I'm going to be talking about 200%, but that's going to be like a 1-minute long discussion. I don't have a lot to say about that. I'm going to be discussing a little bit of something that happened earlier on this week in the Banjo community Discord, or the DickusCon's Big Gay Invitational Discord, and I'm not going to be spending a whole lot of time on that either, and maybe a minute or two just discussing a little PSA, as well as recapping exactly what it is that I stream to on Twitch. A lot of people have interesting ideas about that, so I'm just going to be going over that quickly. And then today, in the meat of the show, I'm going to be going over Whiskey Peak, which is where I left off last week in One Piece, and then I'm going to be discussing Little Garden in depth a little bit, and then I'll be talking about Drum Island, which I need to look through a couple notes on the thing, because I can never remember exactly how Drum Island starts, because there's a lot of political things that happen in that arc, so it's also not that exciting, in my opinion. Drum Island has a lot of really cool emotional moments to it, but for the most part, it's fairly straightforward, and it's kind of a bit of a collapse from the current arc that we go on, and it's just kind of a side thing for hey, we need this crew member slot filled, so let's go here real quick, fix something up that's wrong with the crew, and then we'll be on our merry way to continue with the overall saga. Oh, excuse me, I need to blow my nose for some reason. I just got something really pungent in my nose. Ugh, I don't know what it is that I'm smelling in my room right now. Ugh, but it smells really strongly like a kind of cleaner. Ugh, and it's just clogging my nostrils. So, excuse me if I sound like I'm dying for the next little bit. But it's fine. I just can't breathe through my nose properly. Ugh. Okay. So, that's our little intro, so let's get going. So, I know I mention this almost every week, but last night I did a Banjo-Tooie 100% run. If you're watching this on YouTube, follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/GarageDoorOpener with an O. That's GarageDooOpener. I stream Banjo-Tooie occasionally, stream Ocarina of Time Randomizer, but last night I did a Tooie run, and I almost I almost beat my time by over a minute, but I messed up at the very end, and it wasn't that great of a run either. So I want to kind of go for it, but who knows exactly if it'll happen anytime soon. So I'm probably going to try and stream 2E at 100% a little bit more lately, because I want to try and beat that time really bad now. Um, so tune in for that. That's all I really had to say about 2E. There's not a whole lot more. Like, I know I promised to stream this and that and here and again, but ugh, but I just can't all the time. So yeah. Excuse me for 30 seconds while I go and open my door. Normally I don't like taking breaks from the show like this, but this is something that I can't just sit and ignore. Okay, I'm back, and my door is open, and now I feel slightly more able to speak. So sorry for the pause. So that's all I really had to say about Banjo-Tooie. There's not a whole lot more. So this is going to be a quick discussion that I'm going to leave mostly anonymous because there's no need to out anyone. I'm just going to basically talk about my general feels about this. So in 2014, when I started streaming, I found friends in the community that I was streaming with, and I mean, it was just like people to chat with and hang out with, and it was cool. Like it was a fun group. So um, as time went on, eventually we convinced one member who was partner at the time to create a Twitch team for us because we thought it would be cool to have a Twitch team because Twitch teams just came out and it was they didn't just come out, but it was like, hey, this person doesn't have a Twitch team. It would be cool if we had some place to stream on Twitch, so it wasn't just us just kind of on our own. So we were like, hey, let's create this Twitch team, and we called it the Symmetry Squad because I don't know, symmetry was just a big word in the language back then. So a lot of Twitch teams operate under the assumption that they're all streaming for a common goal. They're open teams. You can apply to be a part of them. For example, back then there was the Wobblers, who were a big Twitch team who were like full of this and that. And then there's still other Twitch teams like I don't know, the Wigglers were a thing back then too, I think, or whatever they were called. And then there's Best of the NES is a Twitch team, and then you got other Twitch teams that people are part of, and they're all community-based things. But the Twitch team that we created was just for us. It was just a funny thing. So it was just like, hey, this is just a thing for us to have on our Twitch page. That's it. There's no openness to it. It's a closed group. We're just people who are like streaming whatever. That's it. And over time, eventually as we became friends with more people and they started joining in, eventually it became really apparent to people that the Symmetry Squad was a banjo themed Twitch team that was like supposed to be for like the upper banjo runners because it's just a coincidence that all the best Banjo Tooie runners happen to be part of the group. So, but in reality, all of that is just coincidence, and it just turns out that we all just get along together really well. And we just hang out. That's it. Like it's just we just hang out and stuff. And a lot of people thinking like I don't know. I see a lot of people these days thinking like Symmetry Squad. They're so bullies and they collaborate against people and stuff like that. But it's like that's not really it. Like the thing is that everybody who's a part of the team has their own opinions on everything. Nobody speaks for a collective group. And a lot of people would say like, "Oh, well, when something's going on, like, they all kind of swarm into chats all together." And it's like, "Well, yeah, that's 'cause we're all really good friends." And usually we're always just in voice chat together, just chatting. And if something happens, one person might go, "Oh, this is happening, in this stream." And then some of us might go check it out. And I understand there's a negative connotation with like seeing a bunch of the same people show up in chats at the exact same time. But I mean like it's not like there's severe shit posting going on about what's going on. It's just like, "Oh, hey, look at this stream." And then all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, I wonder what's going on in there," kind of thing. And I'm not going to say that like nobody in the group is a shitter because I mean, quotation mark, because I know a lot of us are, and it's just how it does. But this whole idea that I saw earlier this week that was like Symmetry Squad hive mind, people are just they're in it to like get over me or to talk me down and stuff like that. And it it really made me angry. Like I mean, I can see where you're coming from with the idea, but it's like nobody thinks for me but me. And to group everyone together and to group everyone's thought process together into the same thing is just incredibly ignorant. And yes, there's the whole like, "Oh, well, why can't I join? Why can't I be a part? Why can't I see what's in your Discord group and stuff like that?" And it's like, well, we're just friends who are just part of a Discord group. We're not an active community of people. We're just we're just a bunch of friends who are chilling on Discord, and that's it. And I mean, if we wanna just chat on our own, then that's our privacy. Um, Another thing that is along the same kind of thought process as that is drama that was happening before that's just like, "Oh, they're the secret banjo society because they keep all their strats to themselves and stuff like that." And it's like, well, yes, I mean, a lot of the biggest routers for the games are just in our group. And we're not keeping strats, but I mean, if someone wants to create a route or talk about strats with, the people who are in the group, that's great and all. But we don't need to do it publicly for everything because, I mean, a billion people who don't play the game commenting on things is just it just makes a lot to read. And instead of sifting through like 80 messages from like 12 different people you have all the people who can like talk about it and kind of do it. People can do things all on their own and they can chat like no problem and just ask for opinions and stuff like that. And I understand being like on the outside, looking in, being like, "Oh, well, they don't need to chat with us or ask us for input because they're not a part of the Symmetry Squad." I mean, that's not that's not it. I mean, it's just because we're here, we're discussing our own little things. You're free to do the same thing in the public Discord if you want, but I mean, it's just a quieter place sometimes to talk. So, I mean, people can argue what they want and how they feel about stuff like this. It's not it's not something that's it's not something that's like it's not really something that's up for debate though. I mean, the bottom line for me is that the Symmetry Squad isn't a community like people think it is. It's just a group of friends, and that's it. That's all. It's just a private Discord. And if people aren't a part of it, then they're not a part of it. That's all there is. If if we like people enough to want to chat with them all the time, then sure, come on in. But that's not one person's decision. And again, and I'm going to stress this part really hard because this is what made me really angry, is that I know that people refer to them as a group, and there's people that like, you know, don't suppress the notion. They bring it up like, Symmetry Squad at it again. Like I hate seeing that because it's like that doesn't make it any better. It's like just stop. Just stop. But the thing I want to stress and bring home is that it's an individual collective of people who have their own thoughts on everything. Nobody speaks for the group, and nobody speaks for me other than me. That's all I'm going to say towards that. So that's just something that was boiling on in my head earlier this week, and I chose to not outlash at the person who was talking about all this stuff because I don't know, I'm just not that kind of a person, but I slept on it and I decided to just leave it be. And since then, there have been some apologies here and there have been some probably changes of mind, but either way, that's just something that I wanted to get clear to people. And if anyone wants to hear my opinion on it, clip it, have it highlighted, watch it on YouTube. I don't care. It's public knowledge for me, but that's just how I feel about it. And if you think, well, I think you're wrong, I think this and that, and the Symmetry Squad is evil, it's like, well, you can think whatever you want, but an ignorant opinion is still an opinion, and I respect that. Okay, so today I'm going to be discussing the next 3 arcs of One Piece that I didn't talk about. To recap what I talked about last week I talked about Arlong Park, the second last and the longest arc in the East Blue Saga, and I talked about Logtown. Logtown, we met a couple of really interesting characters, and it kind of changed the focus of the series a little bit. Like, at the very beginning, the series was Luffy was like, alright, let's grow our pirate crew and go through. And in the arcs, from the beginning until the end of Logtown, you were introduced to all the main little pieces of the series. You have the pirates, the good pirates, who are Luffy, of course, Luffy and his crew. You have the bad pirates, who are the pirates who want to just cause mayhem. And then you have the random civilians here and there, dotted around. And you have the Marines. So the Marines, the bad pirates, and the good pirates form kind of like a triangle. Like nobody really likes each other. So you learned a couple different kinds of bad pirates. There are the pirates who want fame, the pirates who want to look after or come after One Piece, like Luffy and Buggy. Well, not really Buggy, but like Don Krieg, I guess. And then you have the pirates who want just to lay low and be pirates. They don't really want to live the pirate life. They just want to be fine, like the Shichibukai pirates, and Kuro was like that as well. And then you have the pirates who just want treasure, just money. They just want to be rich, like Buggy and Arlong. And there's more, like not everybody is kind of after these three things: fame, power, and wealth. It drives a lot of the pirates in the series, but most of the pirates fall under one of those three categories. Um, then you have the Marines. There's just the general Marine captains, and then the Marine sergeants, and just the general little minions like Kobe and Helmeppo, and then the Marine captains like Morgan and Smoker. And Smoker is the first character in the series who had the Logia Devil Fruit power. And Logia fruits are incredibly powerful at this part in the series because you cannot harm them at all. A Logia fruit has basically, I mean, they all have weaknesses, but they're all just basically like, they're super powerful fruits, basically. The ability to transform your body into something is quite a powerful ability that not everyone possesses. So first we're going to talk about Misty Peak. So after we left the discussion last week, I talked about Laboon and meeting Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine inside the big whale Laboon. So they jumped overboard and the crew sailed off to Whiskey Peak. Now, I keep saying Misty Peak and I keep saying Whiskey Peak. They're actually the same place. The 4Kids dub has no references to any alcohol, smoking, or violence or whatever. So, Whiskey Peak was rechanged to Misty Peak because of just the name. So, when the crew lands at Whiskey Peak, they are greeted by a large audience of people. There's people who are just like all there. And basically, it's a pirate town. So, Whiskey Peak is the first island on the Grand Line. And it's basically a bunch of people who love pirates. And the crew is celebrated by a giant party. There's heavy drinking. There's all this and that. And basically, the crew has a wonderful time. And then everybody falls asleep. So, after the crew falls asleep, and it turns nighttime on Whiskey Peak, Miss Monday and Mr. 8 appear with Mr. 9 and Miss Wednesday, and they start discussing what they're going to be doing with the pirates, because they recognize them as Luffy, and he has a big bounty on his head. So they start discussing, like, what are we gonna do with these pirates? And basically, as they're discussing, I wonder what's gonna happen, Zoro is seen overhearing their conversation. So basically, Zoro and Nami faked passing out from the drinking and basically thwarted their surprise attack. So so Zoro begins attacking them, and there's a big fight between Mr. 8 and Zoro and Mr. 9 and Miss Valentine's Day and Miss Monday, and basically the four agents of Baroque Works. Um, basically, there's just a big fight, and Zoro Zoro tries out a new attack when he's doing these, which I believe I can't remember what he called it at the time, but it turns into another attack earlier. But it's basically a flying sword attack. And basically Zoro cuts up all the Baroque work agents and they're all defeated. And Nami, who's also awake because she faked passing out, starts to kind of look for treasure and stuff like that in the town. So what Baroque Works is they're basically this secret organization that Zoro overhears, and he's just like, "Oh, you guys are part of Baroque Works. I remember that name from when I was a bounty hunter." So the mayor of Whiskey Peak, Igarapoy, he's actually Mr. 8, and he was just posing as someone all along. And Mr. 8 and Miss Monday are like a really weird combination. Um, Miss Monday is this black woman who's very very muscular and very strong, and her main attacks are just basically like throwing big wooden planks at people. Meanwhile, Mr. 8 is this large man who has these long curls in his hair, and he basically shoots guns out of the curls with a saxophone. Meanwhile, in the previous arc that I discussed, Mr. 9 is like a kingly figure. He's like the skinny guy who wears a crown, and he carries two clubs. Meanwhile, Miss Wednesday uses these. I can't remember. They're called peacock slashers, but they're basically these long chains that she swings around and throws at people. And she rides a duck known as Karoo as well. So the four of them fight, and Zoro takes down the millions, who are basically the millions are basically the minions of Baroque Works. So Zoro takes them down without much effort, and he ambushes everyone, basically. Zoro defeats Mr. 8 and Miss Monday, and then Luffy Luffy wakes up in the middle of the night. And Luffy wakes up in the middle of the night and has to pee. And he goes to do that in the river, and he's like big and fat because he ate so much during the feast. And Luffy looks around and sees everybody is like cut up, and he gets pissed. Like, Luffy is like, "Dude, these people threw a party for us, and you just like cut them up? How dare you?" And Zoro's like, "Well, wait a sec." But Luffy just starts attacking him, like, just out of the blue. Like, there's just like there's nothing that can be done. So while this is happening, the town is visited by another pair of Baroque Works agents, Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine Day. And both of these are devil fruit users. They are the first devil fruit users from Baroque Works that you come across in this series. So Mr. 5 has these dreadlocks, and he has the ability to turn uh, basically his boogers or anything on his body, I think, into bombs. So he can basically blow them up. And so basically what he does is he just kind of flicks boogers at people from his nose and they blow up. And then Miss Valentine's Day, his partner, has the ability to Miss Valentine's Day has the ability to change her body weight, so she can change her body weight from light as a feather and blow away in the wind to heavy as several tons as well. So she can kind of control it entirely at will. So they show up in the middle of Luffy and Zoro fighting, and they show up because they've discovered that there's a spy in Baroque Works who is infiltrated, and they've been sent to the town to dispatch them. So they know that the spies are actually Mr. 8 and Miss Wednesday. So while Luffy and Zoro are doing their fight, Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine's Day are trying to take out Mr. 8 and Miss Wednesday. But the fight just keeps getting in the way because Luffy and Zoro keep, like, smacking into them. And so basically they're completely, like, defeated just by pure chance, like, in the arc. So eventually Nami convinces Luffy, like, hey, wait a sec, like, they're evil. So, and Luffy's like, oh, why didn't you say that in the first place? And Zoro's like, well, I tried, but you attacked me. So it's actually a really humorous fight, like how you go from Zoro just like coolly taking down all of these rogue agents up until Luffy just kind of attacking Zoro and then just like, oh, okay, everything's fine. So I think I messed up the events of the arc a little bit, because Miss Valentine's Day and Mr. 5 show up before Luffy does, but then they just yeah they unintentionally defeat Mr. 5 and Miss Golden Week while they're fighting. So, but the fight starts beforehand, and then Luffy just kind of discovers them after. So anyway, they're defeated. Luffy comes to his senses, and then they find out that Mr. 8, who is known as not Igarapoi, but he's known as Igaram, is actually one of the attendants of the King of Alabasta. And Vivi, who is posing as Miss Wednesday in the organization, is actually the Princess of Alabasta, Nefeltari Vivi, who is the daughter of the king of the country. So, Mr. 9 and Miss Monday are a married couple, and they were paired with Igaram and Vivi. And so Vivi basically says, like, okay, I need to basically she explains what's going on. Baroque Works is initiating a civil war in her country, and the rebel army is getting ready to they're basically fueling the war against the Citadel. But Baroque Works is fueling the fire, and she's hoping to infiltrate the organization and defeat its leader in order to stop the takeover, because the leader of Baroque Works is planning on taking them down. And so the Straw Hats overhear, well, not all the Straw Hats, but Luffy, Zoro, and Nami overhear Vivi talk about the Civil War, and Vivi reveals that the leader, that she infiltrated Baroque Works to find out all this stuff, and she reveals the name of the leader of Baroque Works, who is Mr. Zero, who is actually Crocodile of the Shichibukai Pirates. So he's one of the 7 warlords, and he's the leader of this secret or criminal organization known as Baroque Works. So as Vivi reveals this information, a pair of Baroque Works agents known as the Unluckies, who's like a cat, or an otter, I think. I think it's an otter and a vulture, named Miss 13 and Miss Friday, overhear the conversation, and they leave the island. And Vivi sees that they saw her reveal this, and they try and stop them, but they get away. So what this does is it puts the Straw Hat crew on the hit list for Baroque Works agents. So basically, now that Vivi has revealed this information, Baroque Works is going to be after the Straw Hat Pirates. So Nami is not pleased at this in the slightest, because she doesn't want to be on the hit list of one of the warlords. Meanwhile, Luffy is really excited because he gets to fight someone strong down the line, and Zoro is just laughing because he's just like, well, I guess we're going to have to escort you back safely now. So Igaram says, if you escort Vivi back to Alabasta safely, we'll give you 1 billion berries. And then Nami's just like, well, we can't say no to that. And so that's just how it is. So Igaram gets ready to leave Whiskey Peak, and as he's leaving on a ship, it explodes. And it just a giant fiery explosion. And as the Straw Hats reach the Going Merry, they find out that Miss All Sunday, who is Crocodile's partner, because all the Baroque Works agents are a male operator under a number, and their female partner. So Mr. Zero's partner is Miss All Sunday, who is the second in command of Baroque Works, basically. The highest ranking female officer, I guess you could say. And she's the one who let Vivi figure out Crocodile's identity. And everyone's like, well, why are you doing this? And she also reveals that she's the one who revealed that Vivi and Igaram were double agents and blew up Igaram's ship. So she's kind of being a double agent to Baroque Works, but not really. So the crew doesn't really know what side she's on, because I mean, yes, she revealed that she was the one who let Vivi know who the leader was, but she also revealed that she's the one who killed Igaram and broke their cover. So it's like, yeah. So Miss All Sunday gives the crew an eternal pose to an island called Nanimonai Island, which is an island that's near Alabasta, but isn't quite at Alabasta. So Luffy breaks the eternal pose because he's like, we don't want your pose. And she doesn't decide where you go. But Vivi's like, why would you do this? So it's like, now we can't go straight home to Alabasta. We have to go the long way. So Luffy's like, well, I'm the captain and I decide where to go. So Miss All Sunday goes off, and she's just laughing, like, how weird. And then the crew, who gathers up Usopp and Sanji, who were sleeping, they just kind of all peace off. And they leave using the log pose to the next island. Now, I don't remember if last week I talked about the log pose. It's a special compass used for moving around the Grand Line. And because in East Blue, Nami just used a regular compass to get around because she's a navigator. She used a regular compass. But when they landed at Reverse Mountain, they saw that the compass kind of moved in all sorts of weird angles. And that's because of the makeup of like the minerals in the Grand Line or something, the compass moves in really weird directions and it doesn't work. You can't navigate the Grand Line with a compass. So what you need is a special compass that you wear on your wrist called a log pose. And the log pose was given to them by Crocus in the anime, who was like, this is what you need to tour the Grand Line. So how the log pose works is that every island on the Grand Line emanates a magnetic pulse or a magnetic pull. And this magnetic pull is very different from island to island. So the log pose is extremely sensitive to these pulls, and it'll always pull to the island that's closest. Moving forward in the Grand Line. I don't know how it doesn't move backwards, but the log pose always takes you in a certain direction. And there's multiple directions that the log pose can take you, but they always take you to a certain combination of islands on the Grand Line. So the log pose that Nami has basically took them to Misty Peak, and it'll take them to the next island and the next island and the next island. But the thing is that the log pose has to get used to the magnetic pull of the island that it's drawn to before it can be pulled onto the next island. So when they landed at Misty Peak, they weren't able to immediately leave and go to the next island because they had to wait on the island for the log pose to adjust. They had to wait for it to adjust to its pull of the island before they could move on. And so once they do that, the pose will point in a direction, and then the crew is just like, alright, our next island is in that direction, let's go. An eternal pose, however, and there are some of these that are shown in the series, and I think the poses are kind of cool. The New World has a different way of getting around, but that'll be discussed in the later half of the series. An eternal pose is a special log pose that is always magnetically pulled to one island. So if you have an eternal pose to an island, it will never switch, and it will always point you in the direction of that island. So Miss All Sunday gives them an eternal pose to go to this island, which is close to Alabasta, and it'll say, like, if you want to come to Alabasta, just follow this, and we'll take you right there. But Luffy just crushes it and said, no, we'll just use the log pose, thanks. So main recaps for the Whiskey Peak arc. They show up. Zoro and Nami fake passing out because they suspect something might be up with the island. Zoro takes out a ton of Baroque work agents in the town, and Luffy fights Zoro. They take out Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine's Day and the other agents that are there as well. And then Vivi drops to the crew who the leader of Baroque Works is, and now the crew is on a hit list for Baroque Works. So that's basically the summary of Whiskey Peak. Whiskey Peak is basically the start of the Alabasta saga for One Piece. You could argue that it starts at Reverse Mountain because that's when you meet Miss Wednesday and Mr. 9, but I mean, yeah, so it kind of starts there, but this is the first major arc. So they leave Whiskey Peak, and the next island that they have to go to is now they have to go to Little Garden. So Little Garden is a prehistoric island, basically, where dinosaurs still exist. Now, this is another thing to bring up about the Grand Line, which isn't really mentioned up until this point or the next arc, but because of the way the weather works in the Grand Line, certain islands are climatized based on their surrounding atmosphere. So, because of the weather on the Grand Line, um, some islands are always summery. Some islands are always locked in eternal winter. Some islands are like more futuristic, and some are more prehistoric. It just kind of depends on how the islands work and who lives on the islands. So Little Garden is an island that is basically full of dinosaurs. And when they arrive at the island, they see basically they're like, okay, we need food because we're running out of food. So Zoro and Sanji head off to have a contest to see who can um, find the biggest dinosaur to eat. So they go off and do that, and Luffy and Vivi decide to go explore around the island while Nami and Usopp stay on the ship. So while Vivi and Luffy are on the island, they come across a giant named Dory, who says he's from an island called Elbaf. And Elbaf is basically an island full of giants. At this point in the series, we still haven't seen Elbaf, but we've known lots of people who are from there. And everyone who's from there is a giant, basically. So Luffy and Vivi meet Dory, and they hear the story, and Broggy comes across the ship, and he's another giant who's on the island, and he talks with Usopp and Nami, basically. So the two of them are locked in an eternal battle to solve an argument that they had 100 years ago that they can't remember what it was anymore. And so basically they just continuously fight every single day until one of them is declared a winner. And I mean, they're both friends, but they have a duel that they need to finish. So that's that. So meanwhile, on the island, there's Baroque Works agents about. So on the island is the first time you meet one of the upper agents, Mr. 3. Mr. 3 and his partner, Miss Golden Week. Basically, Mr. 3 has the ability to form things out of wax, and that's just his ability. It's a paramecia ability to turn his body into wax or create wax sculptures out of parts of his body. So, I mean, he can just endlessly let wax flow from a part of his body and turn it into a wax figure. And these wax figures are very strong, like they're as strong as steel, like you can't break them. And he can endlessly blotch it out. So it's a very strong ability. And Miss Golden Week, his partner, is a child who has a paint easel, or not an easel, but a paint palette and a brush. And she has the ability to create these little symbols out of paint and put them on people to control their emotions. So, and control like kind of how they operate. So they're quite a powerful pair, and they meet up with Miss Golden Week, or not Miss Golden Week, they meet up with Miss Valentine and Mr. 5, who were recently defeated in Whiskey Peak, and they're just like, well, they're the giants here. Both of them have a 100 million bounty on their head, so why don't we just capture them and turn them into the Marines? So they know that they're fighting all the time. So basically, Mr. 3 plants a bomb inside one of his drinks, and when he consumes all the alcohol, Um, basically, when he consumes all the alcohol, it it blows up in his stomach, and he's kind of not able to focus on exactly what's going on because he has all these internal injuries. So when the volcano erupts and Dory and Bragi have to continue their fight, Bragi is at a disadvantage because um, because he thinks that, I mean, yeah, basically they still have to fight. Dory is um, Dory is at a disadvantage. He is defeated by Bragi, and Bragi celebrates because he's like, after 100 years, we finally finished our battle. But right after he wins and he starts, crying in victory, Mr. 3 comes out and announces like, "Hey, actually, the reason that you won is because I intervened and and that's pretty much it." So Mr. 5 basically just like completely destroyed his insides. So Bragi thinks that Dory is dead and it wasn't like his fault. And so now he's mad at Mr. 3 who's taunting him basically. And he basically like pins him down with wax because he had injuries from Bragi as well. So meanwhile, well, I guess that happened a little bit later, um, but um, meanwhile, Zoro, Nami, and Vivi are all captured by Mr. 3 and put into a giant candle set, which is designed to basically turn them all into wax figures. And they're all stuck with their feet buried in the wax, and they can't escape, and they can't do anything except wait for the wax to cover them. So Zoro, so Zoro's Luffy is trapped under a rock because earlier on in the arc, when he was in a fight with Dory after the explosion happened, and he was blamed for it, Dory just picked up a giant rock and put it on Luffy, so he can't escape. However, he got blown up by Mr. 5 when he was trying to finish off Luffy, and it basically blew the rock away, I believe. All the little details on this is kind of foggy. It's been a while. So, anyway, Luffy's trying to find Zoro, Vivi, and Nami, and Usopp is elsewhere as well. So, Zoro's idea, and the only way that he can escape, is to cut off his own ankles and be free, and then cut up Mr. 3. And Nami's just like, "That's the craziest thing I ever heard." And he's like, "Oh yeah? Well, we're about to see just how serious I am." So Zoro goes to cut off his ankles, and at the same time, Luffy comes flying into the scene to save them, and and Usopp and Karoo are with them as well. Because I mean, Usopp's most powerful attack, his gunpowder star, can't be used against Mr. 5 because he's an explosion man, right? So Luffy tries to destroy the candle set, and meanwhile Mr. 3 is like, "Well, no, you can't do that, so I'm gonna fight you." And meanwhile, Zoro has cut halfway through his ankles right before Luffy showed up. So Zoro has these gigantic scars on both sides of his ankles now, just because he just cut halfway through his leg. And I don't know, it's just really funny to me how it worked like that. So anyway, Mr. 3 forms this giant mech suit out of wax, and he goes to fight Luffy with it. And Miss Golden Week plants these symbols on Luffy so that he doesn't really want to fight. So he's just kind of sitting there drinking tea and eating biscuits with Miss Golden Week. Meanwhile, while Zoro, Nami, and Vivi are being covered in wax. So the wax is starting to stiffen on them because the way the candle set works is it's basically a big birthday cake. And then at the top there's this big spinning candle that spits wax on them. And so they're slowly getting covered in wax. So Zoro decides that the only necessary thing he can do is wait for Luffy to save them, and if he doesn't, then he's going to strike a cool pose so he can at least be covered in a big wax statue. Like, he can at least be a cool wax statue. So, Usopp decides the only necessary action here is he burns off Luffy's clothes because Luffy's shirt has the Golden Week symbol on it, and then I can't actually remember what happens to Miss Golden Week. Oh yeah, basically Usopp takes this special rope that he has, and with Karoo, he lights it in gasoline and puts it all over Mr. 3's candle set. And then he lights it on fire. So Luffy sets the rope on fire as Usopp moves the oil, and it just basically lights the entire candle set on fire. And Mr. 3 is like, oh no, it's melting. What's going on? So the fire is going on, and meanwhile, while this is happening, Luffy is fighting Mr. 3, and Usopp tricks Mr. 5 into swallowing a Tabasco shot because he pretends to, yell out his attack, and it's, the grenade star, whatever it is. But then he's like, actually, I lied. And so Mr. 5 bursts into flames because his mouth is so hot from this thing. Meanwhile, Miss Golden Week is about to take down Usopp because she gets above him with her low weight ability and then puts on several tons to do a guillotine, but she gets sniped out of midair by Nami and Vivi, who are now free from the candle set. And then Mr. 5, who's about to finish the job with his little snot gun that he uses to fire explosions, goes to finish them off, and he's like, how dare you do this? But Zoro comes from the flames of the candle set and basically finishes Mr. 5 off. And then Miss Golden Week and Karoo or Vivi and Karoo basically take out Miss Golden Week in the end. So Mr. 3 runs into the forest, tries to run away, and he creates a ton of wax clones of himself, and he's like, there's a ton of wax clones, and he's like, however will you find the right one? If you pick wrong, I'll stab you and kill you. And then Luffy just so happens to punch the right one in the face. And that's the end of Mr. 3. So overall, the fight on Little Garden it's really interesting because of the devil fruits you get to see, because up to this point you don't really see any devil fruit fights because all the characters are just strong by themselves. But Mr. 5, who has the ability to turn himself into a bomb, and then Miss Valentine's Day, who can change her weight and stuff like that, and then Mr. 3, who can create these wax sculptures. It's all really interesting to see in general, and I mean, there are definitely more interesting ones later on in the series as well, but for now, this is the first big fight where you had Devil Fruit versus Devil Fruit. And I mean, Luffy's Devil Fruit is just really strong in general because the rubber makes it so he can't feel the pain from attacks so clearly. And then on top of that, I mean, he can stretch and stuff like that too. So meanwhile, while all this is happening, Sanji is completely out of the picture for the entire arc. He's doing absolutely nothing. And he's in the middle of the woods, carrying, his dinosaur that he got for his and Zoro's competition. And he comes across a wax house that Mr. 3 and Mr. 5 and their female partners were talking in earlier. And he's sitting in the house, and he gets a phone call from the Den Den Mushi that's sitting on the table. And he answers it, saying, "Hey, this is the shitty restaurant," because, I mean, that's just how he answered. And he talks to Crocodile, who believes he's talking to Mr. 3. So, Crocodile is basically like, "What's going on here? What is the report? Like, are the Straw Hats dead?" And Sanji, who pretends to be Mr. 3, is just like, "Oh yeah, they're all taken out," and stuff like that. So, as he's talking on the phone, he looks over to the window and he sees the Unluckies, Mr. 13 and Miss Friday are there. And they are the ones who put the Straw Hats on the hit list. And they're looking at Sanji being like, okay. So Sanji sees them and is like, this isn't good. So he takes them both out, and they're now completely out of the picture. So Sanji basically hangs up the phone, and it just tells Crocodile on the other side, like, "Oh yeah, they're all taken out. You don't have to worry about them no more." Crocodile's like, "Great," and then he hangs up the phone and he's like, "I'm gonna kill that guy later," because he's just dumb and he's done his part of the job. So Mr. 3 is defeated, Mr. 5 is defeated, and that's the last time you ever see of Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine's Day. They just stay defeated on the island. Broggy learns that Mr. 5 was actually the reason that the bomb exploded in Broggy's stomach, and Broggy turns out to actually be alive. So Sanji finds an eternal pose to Alabasta on Mr. 3 because, I mean, that's just the way to get back to the island. So he takes the eternal pose and is like, "Alright, so we need to go to Alabasta because this and this." So they take the eternal pose and they go to leave. But they can't leave, and it's the only way that they can leave the island is the eternal pose, because Luffy was opposed to using it before when Miss All Sunday recommended, "Hey, use the eternal pose," but Dory and Broggy explained to Nami that the time that the log pose needs to adjust to the island's pull is 100 years. And they're just like, "Well, we can't wait 100 years." So they decide, or is it 1 year? Can't remember if it's 1 year or 100 years. I think it's 100 years. I'm just quickly looking this up. Yeah. So anyway, I don't remember what it is, but either way, it's an arbitrarily long amount of time that they can't wait. So they decide, okay, let's use the eternal pose and go to Alabasta. So they leave, they're attacked by giant goldfish, Dory and Broggy team up to take down the goldfish, and then the crew makes it out and is on their way to Alabasta. Meanwhile, Vivi and Nami had their clothes burned off earlier, and Nami got bitten by a little insect while she was in the woods, and so it wasn't much anything there. It was like, ow, what was that? But now it turned out that it's actually something that's really bad. So they leave. They got the eternal pose from Sanji got the eternal pose from the Unluckies, and it was revealed that the reason Dory and Broggy are actually fighting for 100 years is because they had a competition to see who could get the largest dinosaur a long time ago for food, and they couldn't argue about which one was bigger or smaller, so they just decided to fight it out for 100 years. So it's like the competition that Sanji and Zoro had at the beginning of the arc, which was really funny. Except these two big dinosaurs, which are now carcasses on the island. Um, it's basically it's just a funny fun end to the arc. So that's it for Little Garden. Overall, the characters on Little Garden are really funny. Like Miss Goldenweek doesn't say anything. She doesn't have any speaking lines, I don't think. But she's just a little kid who doesn't say anything. Mr. 3 is like he's basically like supposed to be the smartest member of Baroque Works. He's the most cunning and stuff like that, and he is a genius, but he basically just like got outsmarted by the Usopp when he lit his candle set on fire. So that's just how it works. So he's one of the upper agents of Baroque Works, sorry, but we'll see more of him again later because that's just how it works. So the last arc before they hit Alabasta is Drum Island. And Drum Island is an impromptu stop for the crew because they didn't need to stop there, but they just happened to. So while the crew is sailing away from Little Garden, Nami gets sick. And she gets really sick. Like she has a really bad fever that just won't go away to like the point where she can barely breathe. So meanwhile, everyone's like, Vivi's like, well, who's the doctor on your crew? And basically, like, they just point to Nami. Like, up until then, she's been like the doctor. Because she helped Yosaku at the beginning cure his scurvy. And she's just basically been the one to look over anyone. So they realize the crew doesn't have a doctor. And while they're sailing to Alabasta, they realize that they're passing by a kingdom or an island known as Drum Island Kingdom, which is known for having the best doctors in the world. So they decide, okay, we need to find a doctor on the island to be our crewmate because we need a doctor on the crew. So the beginning of Drum Island is always a little bit foreign to me because it starts out with a couple different story things. But basically how it works is Drum Island is made up of the best doctors of the world. Like all the best doctors live on Drum Island. And years ago, a guy named Wapol took over the island. Like he was the king of the island, and he left for a long time because I don't know, he was a pirate. But then he decided to come back because he wanted to. So the leader of the captain's guard, known as Dalton, was I'm trying to remember exactly. Okay, I'm just going to start and talk about the past because I'm sure that'll help explain. So, years and years ago on Drum Island, there was a kingdom ruled by Wapol, and it was a terrible kingdom, and everyone was basically feared. So all the remaining doctors, the Ishi 20 is basically like the 20 best doctors in the world were held hostage by Wapol, and they were only allowed to perform medical things on him. Or if they paid him enough, they could get treatment from one of the doctors. So they were all in command of the island, and one day the island is attacked by a pirate named Blackbeard and his crew. And Wapol is astounded by Blackbeard's power, and he was a coward, so he and the Ishi-20 fled the island and just ran away. And Blackbeard went through the island, did his thing, and then left. And Dalton, who was the captain's guard, who was the leader of the captain's guard, stayed on the island, and he basically took over the island for Wapol. Now, Wapol is just like this cowardly, pompous ruler, but Dalton was a good guy, and so he decided to just stay there and just be a good guy. So years later, Dalton lives in a town called Bighorn on the island, and he leads the military. And he basically, like, they basically attack Luffy when he shows up. But Dalton calls them off because he's like, never mind, these guys are good guys. So Dalton explains that there's only one doctor left on the island after Wapol took away with all the rest of them. And her name is Dr. Kureha. She's a witch that lives at the very top of Drum Island in the castle where Wapol used to live. She comes down to, on her own whim, to check for patients to tend to, but other than that, she just stays up in her castle, and that's it. So Luffy decides that, okay, in order to take her there, we're going to have to climb to the top of the Drum Rockies ourselves. So Dalton's like, well, there's no way up there, you'll have to climb the mountain. And he's like, I'm fine with that. So Luffy, Sanji, and Nami, well, Nami's like almost completely unconscious at this point. I think she is unconscious at this point. Luffy, Sanji, and Nami decide to ascend the Drum Rockies, and meanwhile Usopp and Zoro will stay in town. So Luffy and Sanji go to climb the mountain, and they're attacked by these big rabbits called lapins, which is French for rabbit, except it's spelt a little different. They're these giant, like, bear-like rabbits, and they're attacked, but they kind of fend them off themselves. So the lapins decide that they're going to cause an avalanche. So meanwhile, while Luffy and Sanji are fending off against the lapins, Wapol shows up back to town and is terrorizing Bighorn. So Zoro is freezing, and he's just like, alright, well, someone give me something warm. So he beats up one of Wapol's men and gets his parka, and then just starts, like, terrorizing the town. Meanwhile, Dalton is fighting Wapol and his henchmen, who completely overtake him. And then, while they're fighting, the avalanche hits. So Sanji and Luffy are trapped in the avalanche up top, and meanwhile Bighorn is completely covered in the avalanche below. So Wapol has a devil fruit power that lets him eat things. The Baku devil fruit power, which I think Baku is Chomp or something like that. So basically he can eat anything and just assimilate it into his own body. So Wapol just eats the snow, and spits out his henchmen and is like, alright, well, now that everyone's covered, I guess it's time to go back home to the castle. Meanwhile, Luffy survives the avalanche, but Sanji is knocked unconscious. So Nami is unconscious, Sanji is unconscious, and he can't leave them there in the snow, so he decides to climb the Drum Rockies himself. So Nami is on his back, tied around his neck with the coat that she's wearing, and Luffy picks up Sanji in his mouth and is basically like, alright, you guys, time to climb. So he basically climbs a flat, bare mountain surface in the wind and the snow with his bare hands. And he almost drops Sanji once, but he gets him with his head and basically continues climbing. So this is the first episode of One Piece I ever saw, was the episode where Luffy just straight up climbed the mountain. And it was really powerful watching, because it was like, damn, dude, this is crazy. And I mean, Luffy's feet and hands are basically getting all bloodied up by the mountain, but he just kind of won't stop. Like, so he just climbs straight up. So when he gets to the top, he's rescued by this monster who's kind of got like I don't know, he just basically gets saved, and then he passes out immediately after. And then Nami wakes up in the hospital bed, and she's just like, oh, I'm awake. So Nami wakes up next to Dr. Kureha, who's this really, really old woman who is over 100 years old. But she still jokes that she's young, and she gets like really offended when people call her old because she thinks that she's still young. But she drinks, I think she drinks prune juice every day, and that's what makes her so youthful. So anyway, Nami is introduced to Chopper, who is this reindeer, and he kind of stands and acts like a human, and he can talk. And and Luffy and Sanji come in, and they see Chopper, and they decide, hey, we need to chase that guy because he would make good venison stew. And so Chopper runs away, and it's really funny watching them like run after each other and stuff like that. And basically, Kureha explains to Nami exactly what Chopper's deal is. So Chopper has probably the most tragic backstory of all the Straw Hats up to this point. Because, I mean, up until now, it was like, okay, well, everything sad happens to them for a reason. And Nami's flashback was really sad because her mother died. Well, her adoptive mother died. Chopper was a reindeer, a baby reindeer, who happened to eat one of the devil fruits as a child. And it was the Hito fruit, which basically, it's the human fruit. So basically, he was able to become a human-ish. So the Hito human is a zone devil fruit that basically allows him to transform into a human hybrid. But because he's an animal, I mean, obviously he's an animal. So the reindeer basically, I mean, first off, Chopper had a blue nose as a reindeer, and so he's like already kind of outcast, but now that he's like part human, he's really outcast. So Chopper gets completely outcasted by all the rest of the reindeer. And he meets this doctor named Dr. Hiruluk, or Hiluluk. I'd say Hiruluk because it's just easier to say. So he meets this doctor who is a quack doctor. He's a terrible, terrible doctor. And he takes him in because he likes Chopper. So he teaches Chopper how to be a doctor. And basically, Chopper learns that Hiruluk has a disease that he's going to die of in 10 days. And there isn't And basically Hiraluk kicks Chopper out and tries to make him angry and hate him because he doesn't want him to see him die. So Chopper finds out that he's going to die, and he decides, I need to cure him so my best friend is still alive. And so he goes out hunting for this mushroom that is known to be like a cure for this disease. So Chopper grabs the mushroom and he concocts a potion, like a medicine for Hiraluk to eat, and Hiraluk takes it and is basically like, thank you, Chopper, for everything you've done. So Hiraluk decides to go up to the top of Drum Kingdom, because this is back when Wapol was in his control of the city. And Hiraluk decides to go up to Wapol, and Dalton is his second in command. And Hiraluk is basically like, well, I had a disease that was going to kill me in 10 days, but I actually ate a poisonous mushroom that Chopper made for me that is going to kill me in a couple hours. So I didn't want him to know that, and so basically Wapol threatens to kill him, but he's like, well, I'm basically already dead, so I'm going to take you down with me. So he blows himself up. And Hiraluk blows himself up on top of the island trying to take down Wapol. And Dalton is just really moved by this because he's just like, But, I mean, nothing really happens because of it. So Dr. Kureha, who is Hiraluk's only other doctor friend, because they were the two rogue doctors that weren't captured by Wapol. She's like, well, I'll take in Chopper and I'll teach him medicine in your place, and I'll teach him to be the best damn doctor I can. So Chopper and Kureha basically started living alone. Dalton was imprisoned because after Hiraluk killed himself, he basically stood up against Wapol, and Wapol locked him away. And then all this stuff with Blackbeard happened, and that was all in the past. So anyway, Chopper's zone fruit is really weird because most zone fruits have the ability to transform yourself into either full animal, full human, or a hybrid of the two. And Chopper's devil fruit power is really original to him because he's not originally a human. So when Chopper is in his human form, his normal human form, he's this tiny reindeer that stands and is just really cute. He is the adorable mascot of the series. Meanwhile, his full reindeer form just looks like a reindeer, and then his human form is like this tall, muscular body. But then his combination is just like this tiny reindeer hybrid that kind of stands really small. So his hybrid form is what he stays in most times, and he calls it his brain point. Heavy point is the human form, and then I can't remember what he calls his reindeer form. I think it's a running point. But anyway, so Luffy and Chopper decide we're gonna make Chopper join our crew because he's adorable. But Chopper is just like, no, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving Drum Island ever. So meanwhile, Zoro and Usopp and Vivi, who are all down below, caught in the avalanche, they all come to, and Dalton is completely buried in the snow. And they're just like, we need to save Dalton. So basically, for the rest of the arc, they're just trying to dig out Dalton from down below. And there's a whole bunch of like really funny things that happen, like like when Luffy or when Usopp comes to, Vivi and Zoro don't recognize him because his face is so swollen because of all the snow and the ice that smashed on his face. So it's just a really funny scene. So it's basically comic relief. Meanwhile, Wapol and his two underlings, Chess and Kuro Marimo, um, they scale the mountain using a tram, I think, or something. I don't know how they get up there. Either way, they scale the mountain and want to take the castle back. So Chopper fights Chess and Kuro Marimo, who get chewed up by Wapol and spit out as a combined soldier named Chess Marimo. And Chopper reveals that because he's studied medicine, he's been able to create a drug that changes the wavelengths of the devil fruit. So Chopper has these little pills that he takes every now and again called rumble balls. And when you take a rumble ball for, I believe it's 3 minutes or 30 minutes. I think it's 30 minutes. Let me have a look at this. How long does the rumble ball work for? I actually can't remember how long the rumble balls last for. But either way, with the rumble ball, Chopper is able to change the wavelengths of the devil fruits, and he can transform into four more abilities. So with the rumble ball, he gets access to Horn Point, which basically gives him gigantic horns in his reindeer form. There's Jumping Point, which gives him a very slim body, which lets him jump really high. And then he gets Arm Point, which basically gives him these gigantic muscular arms, which basically makes it so he can attack a lot harder. And then he gets a Defense Point, or whatever it's called. I can't remember, but it's basically like his fur gets really, really big, and he can like just basically make like a shield around his body. So those are Chopper's Rumble Ball abilities. So he uses the Rumble Ball to defeat Chess Marimo, and then Luffy fights Wapol. And basically, it's a really funny fight because, I mean, Wapol isn't a serious character at all, and he just wants his town back. So Wapol decides he needs to get into the armory because if he eats all the weapons in his castle, he can assimilate them into his body and become like a big machine. So he goes into the castle, but Nami steals the key from off his body, so he has no access to it. So Wapol remembers that there's a giant gun in the attic that he can use to fire at Luffy, but when he goes to pull the trigger, it turns out there's actually a bird nest. There's a bird nest living in it since he's been away from the castle so long. So he gets trapped by Luffy on the roof, and Luffy blasts him away with his Gum Gum Bazooka attack, and he's basically left the island again. So the fight that's on top of Drum Island isn't that drawn out. I mean, while this is all happening, Sanji is trying to fight as well, but Kureha is basically telling him not to because he's like got broken bones from the avalanche, and so she's just like constantly like attacking, and she's got a bit of a temper, but she's just a funny character in general. So after Wapol gets blasted away, Dalton comes up because Dalton wants to fight Wapol too. He learns that Wapol has been defeated, And then Dr. Hirolik's plan was always to create was to make it so cherry blossoms would grow on Drum Island because cherry blossoms are beautiful. So basically, they fire out of these. Fires out of these cannons these pink things that basically turn the snow falling into cherry blossoms, and it's really beautiful. So that's a really quick description of the end of the arc. Not a whole lot happens in Drum Island other than that. I mean, there's the whole Dalton and backstory stuff, and then there's not a whole lot that goes on to that. So Chopper agrees to join the Straw Hat crew because Kureha basically threatens to kill him. So she basically throws bottles at him and is like, "Get out! You're not living with me anymore. You're this and that." So Chopper runs away, decides to join the crew. Then all this cherry blossom stuff happens because Kureha was the one that did it with Dalton's help, and then Chopper cries and it's very emotional. And it's kind of like how Sanji left. Basically Sanji was forced to leave by everyone who lived there because they thought he thought they hated him. But then it turned out they loved him very much and they were just trying to do what was best for him. So Chopper joins the Straw Hat crew after that as the Doctor, and yeah, it turned out that the reason Nami was so sick was because she got bit by some prehistoric insect on a crazy island and it was going to kill her. And if she would have made it to Kureha maybe a couple days later, she would have been dead. So, whew, close one. So, before the Straw Hats leave the island, Dalton pulls Luffy aside and says, "Hey, there was a really hot day we had not too long ago, and I thought it was really weird, but there was someone looking for you." And Luffy's like, "Someone looking for me? Like, who could that have been?" So Dalton says that one day he was visited by a man dressed all in black, and I can't remember if he tells Luffy this. I think it's just, oops, I forgot to tell him. Yeah, it was Kureha and Dalton talking after Luffy left. My bad. I forgot that Luffy never actually learned this. But oh yeah, I forgot. This is the first time you hear Will of D as well. I'm just quickly looking at the wiki for the end of this because there's something here that details about this scene that I forgot. So, as the Straw Hats sail off, Kureha and Dalton start talking, and Kureha realizes that the full name of Luffy is Monkey D. Luffy, and reveals that Gold D. Roger also had the D in the middle of his name, and this is referred to a lot in the series as the Will of D. And she says that her student Chopper seems to be sailing with a very dangerous man. Two of the villagers suddenly come around and say, "Oh wait, we had a message for Luffy from a man named Ace." One day there was a man who came across town by the name of Ace who was looking for Luffy, and he was also looking for Blackbeard as well, Blackbeard the pirate. But he said that if you see Luffy, tell him I'll be waiting for him in Alabasta. So Luffy never found that out while he was there, but they're headed for Alabasta anyway, so they thought, okay. Dalton, however, recognized Vivi as the Princess of Alabasta, so he knew that they were heading to Alabasta anyway because Vivi was with them, and so, yeah. So, yeah, basically Ace is going to wait for Luffy in Alabasta for 10 days, and then he's gone. And so, maybe Luffy will get to see Ace in Alabasta. And then they sail off, and that's the end of Drum Island. So then there's a party on the ship. They celebrate Chopper as the new crew member, who is crew member, yeah. This is also the first time you ever see Portgas D. Ace. I'll be talking about him next week on next week's episode. Next week I will only be covering Alabasta because there is a lot to talk about in Alabasta. Alabasta is one story arc on one island, but it has a lot of things that happen in it. So this arc also laid the foundation for something really important, and that is basically Blackbeard laid waste to the town, and then Ace came through the town looking for Blackbeard. And you don't really know who those two are at this point in the series, but eventually you will meet both of them, and both of them will turn out to be extremely important, and we'll get to that as we get to that. I believe the first time I'll be talking about Blackbeard is going to be not next week, because next week is Alabasta, but the week after that. I'll be talking about Blackbeard in Jaya, when I talk about Jaya and the first half of Skypiea. And then the week after that, I'll probably talk about the second half of Skypiea, the Long Ring, Long Island Davy backfight arc, as well as the intro to Aokiji and Water 7. So that's all I had to talk about this week for Drum Island. For One Piece in general, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of major storyline stuff that happened that touches other parts. It's mostly all condensed. One Piece likes doing a lot of things where it sets up something down the line, but everything here was pretty much as it is. Whiskey Peak, Little Garden, Drum, and Alabasta are all kind of together. And then there's a bunch of storyline touches here and there when you start talking about Ace and Blackbeard and Drum Island. There's not a whole lot that happens that's part of Drum Island elsewhere in the series, because it's all pretty situated where it is. The next time you see Dalton and Kureha, I believe, is at Reverie, but I mean, that's not really that important anyway yet in the story. So yeah, that's about it. Anyway, that's all I had to talk about One Piece. Again, next week I'll be talking about Alabasta. Start talking about the beginning when they land. I probably won't be talking a whole lot about the filler of Alabasta, because there is a lot of it. But everything up to Alubarna, as well as the conflict in Alubarna, I'll talk about a little bit. And then after that, who knows what I'll be talking about. I'm pretty sure Alabasta will carry me through the rest of the week, but who knows. So that's it for the GDO show this week. Thanks for tuning in, anyone that did. If you're watching on Twitch, you can rewatch the episodes anytime you want on youtube.com/GarageDoorOpener with a 0. That's Garage Door, GARAGEDOOR 0 PENER. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can watch the shows live every Friday at 5 p.m. PST at twitch.tv/GarageDoorOpener with an O. That's Garage Door, the same way as I spelled before, just OPENER as it was originally intended. You can submit any questions to me for answering at theGDOShow@gmail.com. Or you can simply ask them in Twitch chat during my show, and I'll probably answer them right then and there, because that's just easy. So that's it for today's show. Tune in next week when we start talking about the other stuff, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your week as you listen to some One Piece to tune out the rest of the show. So have a good week, and I'll see you next time.